Good morning. My name is Deb Bowers, and we'd like to welcome you to Open Circle. Congratulations to all of you for remembering to turn your clocks back. Unless, I don't know if there were any of you who were here an hour ago that Sorry. Okay. Before we begin today, I would like to introduce Mr. Michael Zimmerman, who has a brief announcement.
Hi, good morning. I'm here to announce I'm a member of the Lake Chapala Jewish congregation here in Ajijic, and this afternoon at 2 o'clock we're going to have a vigil at the synagogue, which is on Margarita in Riberas. If you head out to Carretera, there's a big gray building, two-story gray building, and you make a left there, and we're inviting people to attend today at 2 o'clock. I mean, this is a tragedy that's affected us. We're afraid. We've been shaken by this, and by the shooting in Pittsburgh yesterday. 11 members of the Jewish congregation were killed yesterday, and many more injured. We don't know how many more will die, and there are vigils all over the United States at different synagogues as well as the one here. And our idea was, rather than circling the wagons, which we might do, we've decided to really depend on relationships that we have with people in the community to encourage them to get involved with us, support us, because we feel the really strength and power we get in our lives is not by circling these wagons, but by reaching out to the different communities here. So today, again, at 2 o'clock at our synagogue on Margarita in Riberas, we're going to have a vigil. I want to just give an example of this reaching out. When I got up this morning at 8:30, I thought about doing something here, and I immediately reached out to my friend Lou Raskin, who's a member of the board of the Open Circle here, and I asked him if I could come over and say something, and he made it possible for me to do this. And this is an example of what I mean by reaching out to the greater community to get support for this kind of tragedy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, out of respect to our presenters and everyone else, please turn off your cell phones right now, and we will remind you to turn them back on. In theory, we will remind you. Okay. Today, the Open Circle mission statement will be read by Michael Warren.
The Open Circle mission statement. Open Circle provides a supportive environment to gather for social interaction and to improve our understanding of ourselves, our community, and our world. Presentations span a wide range of intellectual, cultural, physical, and spiritual topics. We do not necessarily agree with the ideas and philosophies of our presenters. We encourage you to listen with an open mind and form your own opinions.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Presentations at Open Circle are scheduled pretty solid up until next summer. Nevertheless, we are always happy to learn of anyone new who would like to make a presentation. If this is you, please contact us through our website is one way, opencircleajijic.org, or address any one of us on the steering committee here today if you're interested, and we can get you more information about how that works. If you would like to receive a weekly announcement about the upcoming programs and are not on our email list, you can sign up on the clipboard that's over there by the tree, over by Brad, our cameraman, and we will each week get an announcement to you of what's coming up, just to keep you updated. Internet video streaming of the current Open Circle presentations are available on YouTube under the channel Chapaladrone, if you're interested. Our cameraman, Brad Gorman, is also uploading old talks from many years past. There's a lot of them. So please be patient. Those will all be there eventually. Okay. Now, we would like to know who is with us here at Open Circle for the first time. I'm not going to make you introduce yourselves, but please stand up so that we can recognize you and the people nearby can welcome you. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, a man with tickets to the Super Bowl finds his seat and relaxes. Once the game begins, another man comes down the aisle and notices an empty seat next to him and asks if anyone is sitting there. No, he says, that seat is empty. This is incredible, says the stranger. Who in their right mind would have a seat like this for the Super Bowl and not use it? Well, actually, the seat belongs to me. I was supposed to come with my wife, but she passed away. This is the first Super Bowl we haven't been to together since we got married in 1947. The stranger replies, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's terrible. Couldn't you find someone else, a friend or a relative or even a neighbor to take the seat? The man shakes his head, no, they're all at the funeral. A boy asks his father, Dad, are bugs good to eat? Dad says, we don't discuss disgusting things like that at the dinner table. After dinner, the father says, okay, son, what did you want to ask me? Oh, nothing, the boy says. Earlier there was a cockroach in your soup, but it's gone now. How we do? Okay, I got one more here. A moth walks into a podiatrist's office. The doctor says, what can I do for you? And the moth says, oh, doctor, I have so many problems. I hate my job. My boss is a terrible person. My wife hates me. My kids never listen. Nothing seems to be going right for me these days. The doctor says, wow, it sounds like you have some serious problems. Maybe you'd better be seeing a psychologist or something. Why did you come into my office? And the moth says, well, your light was on. Okay. Okay, are we done here? Okay. Okay, one last little tiny one in honor of today's topic. Remember this, you matter. Unless you multiply yourself by the speed of light squared, then you energy. Get it? Sorry, it was a little... Okay. Next week's presentation, Wise Guys, presented by John Stockdike. What is wisdom? What is the difference between wisdom and common sense? What is the difference between wisdom and intelligence? Can inexperienced youth be wise? Can artificial intelligence be wise? Where in the world are the wise guys today? And dare we ask the question, where are the gals? And dare we hear the answer? John Stockdike will provide his personal experience in pursuit of wisdom. He will also provide beyond doubt that he himself is not wise. John has spoken previously at Open Circle about his spiritual journey and his mental health challenges. 2 years ago, he launched the Ajijic Book Club, which focuses exclusively on nonfiction. Currently, he is working on a new initiative for those of us who are spiritual but not religious. He and his wife, Pat, have lived at Lakeside for 6 years, having arrived from Calgary. Please join us for this next week. Okay. Today's centering moment will be led by David Dennis.
Good morning, everybody. Today is a very unusual day for 2 reasons. One, you're getting the same meditator this week that you got last week. Why? My wife was scheduled to do the meditation. She's homesick. Second reason, very unusual. Today has 25 hours. That doesn't happen every day. And the folks that got here at 9 o'clock got a very unusual hour. So I'm going to build on that concept and ask you if you could take that extra hour, be transported anywhere in the world, be with anyone, anywhere, or be doing anything that you value, is productive or is fulfilling, and you just had that hour, bam, what would you do with it? Everybody get comfortable in your seats. Let the chair hold you, and take a couple of deep breaths. And for about a minute and a half, meditate on what that hour would be for you. A minute and a half. Take a couple of more deep breaths and come back to this space. And I hope you all had a wonderful journey. Thank you.
Today's presentation, The Dimensions of the Universe and You, presented by Kenneth Hunt. The real miracle of the existence of the universe is that the whole manifestation, everything that is knowable, emerges from inherent properties of the very stuff of which it all consists. It might be helpful for us to have a sharpened sense of where we stand in the scale of things that have emerged from the turmoil of the Big Bang. Before we can do that, however, we need to increase our understanding of millions, billions, and trillions and their relative sizes. Ken will explore several ways to appreciate relationships among big numbers, and then we'll explore the dimensions of the universe. Ken is a science nerd. He has been reading and thinking about stuff like this for a long time and has learned a lot. He wants to interest you in it, too. Please welcome Kenneth Hunt.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. Especially, I want to thank you for coming if you happen to have been here the last time I tried to deliver this talk. I learned something about that. Our daughter-in-law, who is an actor, said, she said, yes, we know about that. We call it going up. And it's a kind of comes out of the blue and unannounced case of stage fright. Unexpected and unanticipated stage fright. Eric, our son, said, no. He said, Ken, I know what it was. He said, you went too far to the edge of the universe and you fell off. And that feels right to me. I'm going to be showing some images here. I know that way in the back you can't see things like this, but one of the reasons for is to switch the mode of taking in information from words to visual. So you can imagine, if you can't really see it, you can fill it in, that's even better, what you see, and then I'll leave the images around and you can come up afterwards and look at them. So before, as Deb said in the introduction, which I haven't read since I wrote that months ago. Oh, in case you weren't here when I did this before, here's what happened. My head exploded. Everything went blank. I couldn't remember what I was going to talk about, and my notes made no sense either. And within a minute or two, it was okay. People thought I'd had a stroke. So fortunately, I had not. All right. So before we can go into that, we have to discuss numbers, big numbers. We're talking big numbers here. And I'm going to tell you a story about big numbers. But before that even, I want to get a sense of the house and where we are and what we think about big numbers. This is a number line. A number line is a linear representation of all the real numbers between one end, in this case 1 million, and the other end, in this case 0. And what I want to do is to ask you to let me know where you think 1,000 might be. And I'm going to start at 1 million, and I'm going to move my finger down towards 0. And when you think I get to where 1,000 might be, raise your hand. And when you think I've gone down below 1,000, put your hand back down again. Okay, that is very interesting. We sort of seem to have a consensus of somewhere down here, right? Would you agree with that? Okay. Now, my story. Last Christmas Day, I called my friend Gregory, and I said, Gregory, I have done what may be a foolish thing. I have signed up to do a talk at Open Circle on the subject of the dimensions of the universe and you, and I know I'm going to need some kind of concrete way to express numbers. Can you help me with this? He said, sure, what could I do? I said, all right, look, here's what I want you to do. On the first of the year, that's, you may remember New Year's was on a Monday this year, I said, I'd like you to bring $1 million of your dollars to the LCS, and I will bring 1,000 of my dollars, and we'll see how these two amounts of money compare. So about 5 of 8 on New Year's Day, I showed up with my little stack of $1,000 bills. It was 4.3 inches tall, and I know that two ways. I know because I measured it, and I also know that the United States banknotes are printed on paper that is 43 ten-thousandths thick. So 1,000 of those is 4.3 inches. But there were bags and boxes all over the place. We decided we would meet up there in the pavilion. And man, when I got here, there was bags and things, boxes all around. Paco was going back for another load, I think. So 8 o'clock, we sat down, we start counting. We're going to count 1 per second. 1, 2, 3. About 15 minutes later, 997, 998, 999, 1,000. Okay, man, I'm done. Let's see. 16 minutes and 40 seconds to count 1,000. He, of course, has got a long way to go. So I said, look, you're not going to be done here for a while. I'll come back on Friday and help you pack all this stuff back in your car. And if you get done before then, you can just leave it here. Nobody will bother it. So I went home. Friday night, late, I came in here around 10:30 or so. Gregory's still sitting here, counting away. He was not even halfway done. As a matter of fact, Gregory did not finish counting his money until the following Thursday, about 1:15 in the afternoon. That's 11 and a half days from the difference between 1,000 and 1 million. And we said, wow, man, that's interesting. So I got my stack out, and we piled Gregory's money up to see how high it would be. It was 558 feet. 358 feet. That is 2/3 of the way up the Washington Monument. So here's another image for you. We've got a 4.3 inch stack of $1,000 and let me get the right, 358 feet stack of $1 bills to make 1 million. So Gregory said, man, that's really interesting. He said, I have an idea. So he gets out his phone and he calls up somebody. He said, let me make a phone call. Hello, Carlos. Hey, Carlos, is Gregory. Yeah, man, how you doing? I'm fine. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, she's fine. Listen, my friend Ken and I are at the LCS, yes, in Ajijic. And he's getting ready to give a talk, and he wants to make sure that people understand some differences between numbers. Could you help us out here? Good. Okay, listen, here's what I want you to do. Next, on the 1st of February, I want you to bring $1 billion of your dollars here. And we'll compare that to what we have already. And he said to me, he's going to do it. So, 8 o'clock in the morning on the 1st of February, I show up, Gregory shows up, Carlos shows up, we're sitting at a table up there on the thing. We start, 1, 2, 16 minutes and 40 seconds later, I'm done. I go home the following Thursday at about 1:15 in the afternoon. Gregory's done. Now, Carlos is in the same relation to Gregory as Gregory was to me when I finished after 15 minutes. You may remember the day. There were huge traffic jams all over town. There were dobles, semi-remolques, every place, turning around, doing U-turns up by the Corona depository up there, just everywhere. And so Carlos will not be finished counting his money until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 19th of August, 2049. It takes, think about this. Now this may sound, that can't possibly be true. So I'm going to just run through these numbers real fast. 16 minutes and 40 seconds is about a quarter of an hour. 1,000, oh, remember this, bear this in mind. 1 million is 1,000 thousands. 1 billion is 1,000 millions, right? So 15 minutes is a quarter of an hour. 1,000 quarters of an hour is 250 hours. That's like more than 10 days. It's actually 11 and a half days. So, and 1 billion seconds is 11,500 days. Divide that by 365 and you get 31 and a half years. And just to fill it out, 1 trillion. Oh wait, one more thing about Carlos's money. We couldn't stack it up. So we laid it all down side by side by side by side like this, and we figured out how far it would go. We measured how far it would go. All right? 1,000 is 4.3 inches. 1 million is 358 feet. 1 billion is 67 miles. 67 miles of $1 bills stacked up like this. And let's go to 1 trillion. We know about trillion, right? We know that Donald Trump wants to give 1.5 of those, again, back to the people who already have the money. And we also know that we spent 3 of those, we spent $3 trillion destroying Iraq and setting the Middle East on fire. So that's a lot of money. And we're going to wind up paying the Chinese 10 trillion back for that fiasco. So 31 and a half years for 1 billion, 31,500 years to count to 1 trillion. So that's a lot. Okay, got that in your head? Now we got to talk about something else. If we're going to talk about the universe, we got to talk about the speed of light, which if you square it and multiply yourself by it, you become energy. And here's an interesting thing about the speed of light. We won't go into this here, but it's very interesting. No matter how you measure the speed of light, no matter how the source of light is moving, no matter how you are moving, you will always get the same answer, the same number. And the number is 299,792,450 meters per second. And those are 9 significant figures, all of which are right. These are dead-on numbers. So there's no question about the speed of light. And just, I guess, to make this point, if there's a car going by this way shooting bullets out the front, and you have equipment and you measure the speed of the bullets, and they pass you, and then they run around the back and shoot the other way, where'd it go? And shoot out the back, you measure the speed of the bullets, you'll find that it's a different speed if it's going this way than if it's going this way, right? But if you measure the speed from the headlight of the car, it's exactly the same. Doesn't matter which way it's going. So try to get your head around that. It says something about what happens to clocks and rulers when they're moving fast. And that's a very strange thing. So this speed of 299 1,792,450 meters per second is a little unfamiliar to us because we happen to live in, or most of us here, to come from a country, one of only 3 in the world, that is not on the metric system. Myanmar, Liberia, and the United States of America are not on the metric system. Go figure that one out. So I'm going to talk about 186,000 miles per second, which is the equivalent of 299,792,450 meters per second. At that speed, if you had a piece of fiber optics wrapped around the world 7.5 times and you shone your flashlight in one end, a second later, 7.5 times around, the other end would light up. That's pretty fast. At that speed, it takes light 8 minutes to get from the sun to the Earth. Okay? There's a thing called the planetary region, which we'll get back to later, which takes about 3 hours by the time you get to the edge of the orbit of Pluto, which somebody told me the other day they'd heard that Pluto has been redesignated as a planet. Is that right? Does anybody else hear that? So, I think that's a mistake. That's the kind of thing that makes people say, oh, science doesn't know anything. They used to think Pluto was a planet, and they were wrong. It's not a planet. Has anything to do with science. It has to do with terminology and what you call stuff. And it gives people an excuse to think that, that science is, well, maybe, but most of it's made up. No, it's not. It's good. It works. It really is true. So 3 hours to the edge of the planetary region, there's a thing called the Kuiper Belt, which is where all the comets, most of the comets that we see in the sky come from. That's 5.5 days. The very edge is called the Oort cloud. It's 550 days. So that's a long way away. Now, you may remember the Voyager spacecraft, which was launched in 1977, the one that Carl Sagan was so instrumental in. That's got the picture of the people on it and the music and all that. It's now still going and still sending back information. Every once in a while, it turns itself on and sends back a little blip, and it takes 18 hours from the time it sends it out till the time it gets back. So it's still pretty close in. All right, so what we really are heading for here is what we're going to use to talk about these things, and that is a unit called the light year. A light year is a measure of distance, not a measure of time. It's the distance light will travel in 1 year. So, we all know that we live on a planet, right? And it's suspended, it is at the very center of the universe. Now, you may not believe that, but by definition, in an infinite universe, every place is at the center. If you look out from here, it's exactly in the center. Doesn't matter what planet you're on. You look out, you see to the edge. We'll get back to talk about what that might mean. And we are in the center. Okay. And this planet is, in spite of having the Marianas Trench, which is 7 miles deep, and Mount Everest, which is 6 miles high, is smoother than a billiard ball. Think about that. And all of activity, all life, everything that people are concerned about goes on a layer on that planet that's about the thickness of 2 pieces of Scotch tape. Total atmosphere, total ocean, and all of life occurs in a very thin layer on top of this smooth, as you can imagine, billiard ball. Now, I want to remind you back to when we were all children, a long time ago for some of us, and think back at night when even if you lived in a city, from time to time you would go out at night and the sky was spectacularly brilliant with stars and the Milky Way and just all kinds of things, right? Do you remember that? We don't have that since about, I would say maybe 40 or 50 years. We're living with what's called light pollution. So you don't really see that anymore. But up until that time, from the beginning of time, until about 50 years ago, people had this experience of looking up at night and seeing this spectacular, what seems to be the inside of a, here's just sort of to jog your memory, this is sort of a 360-degree panorama taken from high in the mountains in Chile, where one of the great observatories is now located. And people tried to make sense of it. They did things like, because we're humans and because we do what we do, which is try to make sense out of stuff, you connect the dots. And from way back, the very beginning, people saw stories and they saw figures and they saw mythological creatures in the sky. And it turned out to be of very practical use, because it helps you to figure out, you make some observations, you see what plants are available to eat, what wild plants are available to eat, and you somehow make the connection that when this particular configuration of stars is here, be a good time to gather some of these seeds and put them in the ground. Maybe next year we won't have to go looking for it. Maybe it'll just grow up right here. So it becomes the basis for agriculture and mythology and so many wonders. People are trying to figure out, well, what is this? Obviously, we're at the center of this thing, right, as I said, but this is a different concept than being at the center of the universe. This is being at the center of what's called the celestial sphere, which is this thing where all the stars live. And not only do the stars live there, but there are 7 other objects which are always there somewhere, and they sail through the background of the stars. They come from wherever. They are Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, and the Sun. These were all called planets in the early days, and planet is a Greek word that means wanderer. And the implication is that these things carry information to us. I mean, it must be true. Here's our whole history, our whole cultural background displayed for us every night in the sky, and these messengers come with, sometimes they turn around and move backwards, and then they go back this way, but they're always there. Now, the Greeks understood that we live on a round object, and they had a pretty good sense of what size it was. And they did not know, the Greeks thought that we were at the center of all of this stuff too. When you're out on a dark night looking up at the skies, you can still see this on a cruise, right? You go out you go on a cruise and you have wonderful, spectacular skies, or you go way off someplace away from cities and you still see this. And you think, wow, millions of stars. But in fact, the number of stars that you can see, greater than 6th magnitude, which is where your eyes cut off, is only between 5,000 and 6,000 in the entire sky. Only between 5,000 or 6,000 individual stars. The rest of it does not get resolved into stars. So people have been thinking a long time about, well, where are we? How does this work? A fellow named Copernicus, who was a Catholic monk, and you know, in those days, much of the scientific work was done with the support of the church. And Copernicus, when he was alive, was not chastised by the church. He was doing his work. He said, I think the sun is at the middle of this thing, and we are on all of these planets, and us go around. And he had a model of that, and he said, yeah, this is how it works. This was about 1350. In 1609, Galileo Galilei, who was teaching mathematics at Padua University in Italy, gets word that someone in Holland has invented an instrument that if you hold it up to your eye and you look through it, it makes things that are far away seem much closer. And within a week or two, he and his assistants have built one. They've built a telescope. And first thing he did with it was to go sell it to the Doge. He happened to be at this time in Venice. And the Doge was the sort of the head honcho of commerce in Venice. And the Doge instantly saw the value of this thing. He can look out at ships coming in. He knows where they went. He knows who goes and comes from the port. He knows what they're carrying. He knows how to unload his supply of peppers, say, before a new shipment comes. And so he pays Galileo handsomely for his work. And then Galileo takes his telescope and he looks up at the sky at night with it. And oh my goodness, this is the beginning of how we come to know all of this stuff. Because he points it first at the moon. And the moon has got mountains and valleys and seas and cities and people, I mean, all sorts of things on it. And then he looked, and if, if you've ever owned a telescope or made your own, which that's sort of what nerds do, it is so exciting to do this for the first time, to see all this stuff. So he looks at the moon. He looks at the Milky Way. And the Milky Way, instead of just being some kind of light shining, turns out to be, literally this time, millions of stars. Just a field of stars. There are so many more stars that he can see through his telescope. And just as a point of technical reason here to think about telescopes as we get into this, the widest that your night-adapted pupil can open is 9 millimeters. Galileo's first telescope happened to have an objective lens that was 43 millimeters in diameter. That's about 5 times. So that means, since the amount of light that comes in depends on the area of where the light is coming through, he's able to see 25 times more light. That's hundreds of thousands of times more stars than he can see with his naked eye. And from that time on, all advances in telescopes, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in a minute, involve 2 things. They involve bigger lenses or mirrors, and they involve more precise, and this is equally as important, more precise guidance so that you can measure. Because at the same time Galileo's doing this, there's 2 folks named Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, who are in Uraniborg, which is in Denmark, I think. Kepler's German, and he's come to work with Tycho, who by this time is old. And Tycho was the last of the naked eye astronomers. He had equipment, he had huge, big instruments, but there were no lenses in them. So it's like a gigantic protractor, right? And a mounted on huge, big wooden supports with brass plates screwed on, where you very carefully scratch the graduation so that you can, now remember, it's nighttime and it's dark, right? So you can't see. So you're looking at a star, you're waiting for the star to come up, and then you have to go read the position of it, and they don't have a flashlight, of course. And so anyway, quite a thing to do. But using just that work, Kepler figures out that yes, Copernicus is right. The sun is at the center. The planets orbit around. Not only that, they don't orbit in circular orbits. They orbit in elliptical orbits, which means they go whoosh, whoosh. Now, that's an exaggeration. That's more like a comet, which has a very much elongated orbits. Planets, by definition, or I mean just because they have to, orbits are all elliptical. They can't be circular. And I think we'll just leave that there. But anyway. Where's page 3? Okay, so there have been improvements in telescopes since those early days, which let me just get to my following Galileo's work. And by the way, did I mention that Galileo was world famous in 1609? He was known over the whole world. He was not a household word. You could not say that. There were maybe a few thousand people on the entire planet who'd ever heard about him. But all of these guys who were doing this work were doing very serious work and publishing it. And by this time, printing presses had been around for 150 years. So there were lots of books circulating. And the information that Galileo is revealing, and he's improving his telescope. Here's an interesting thing. In 1642, Galileo dies and Isaac Newton is born. Isaac Newton invents another kind of telescope called a reflector telescope. It's called a Newtonian reflector, and that's what most people, if you've had a backyard telescope, it was a Newtonian reflector, and it's one of those where you look in the business end. It doesn't make a whole. You don't do this, but you look in the side of the top. And the work done by astronomers during the 16th, 17th, 18th, on into the 19th century involved work on the solar system. Well, it involved two things: work on the solar system and hunting for comets. A lot of guys spent a lot of time looking for comets, which just sort of show up from time to time, and you go out at night and you search the sky, and when you see a fuzzy, comet means hair, I think. When you see a fuzzy thing, you watch it for a few days and see where it's going. And they kept getting confused by these objects in the sky, which are fuzzy-looking objects, but they're not comets. They're there all the time. Here's one. This happens to be a nearby object to where we live in the universe, and it's a galaxy. We'll get in a second to what a galaxy is. So the advance of astronomy and the advance of understanding of our place in the universe and where we are has been in lockstep with advances in technology and mechanical work and the precision with which things can be machined. Until 1836, nobody really knew how far away it was to the stars. They'd figured out by now the distance to all of the planets. They discovered a couple of new planets that were not visible without a telescope. So now we're up to 8 planets. And but nobody knew how far it was to the stars, because what should happen is this. The Earth is going around the sun at a distance of 93 million miles from the sun, right? So at one time of the year, it's way over here, and at another time of the year, it's way over here, 186 million miles away. And if you know what parallax is? If you hold your finger up and wink one eye and the other eye, your finger jumps back and forth against the background, right? Well, that should happen with stars. When you're over here looking at and you take a picture of the stars, or you make a drawing of the stars, and then you're over here and you do the same thing. There should be some movement between the images, right? Caused by parallax. You're looking at it from a different point of view. Did not happen, was not measured until 1836, which is a very long time to have not been able to measure that. But the reason is because it's because the things are so far away. Even the stars that they're trying to determine the distance to, just stars, is so far away that it's so. The first star is determined to be about the nearest star, I'll tell you now, is 4.3 light years from the sun. So it takes light 4.3 years from the time it leaves that star to get here. Within 100 light years of the Earth, there are maybe 3,000 or 4,000 stars. And another thing is happening in the other direction. Think about this. Not only is light coming to us from the stars, but Amos and Andy broadcasts are going out since 1928 to the entire universe. So there's a bubble of 100 light years in which anybody who has the right equipment can know that we are here. Now, they're not going to be here for a while because it takes a long time to go this distance, but they may be on their way. We don't know. So get ready. In 1922, the 100-inch telescope on Mount Wilson in Los Angeles, which at the time was a great place to build an observatory. Not so anymore, but it was great because of the thermal inversion, which is what causes the air pollution now. but in those days it caused the air to be very still. So if you're looking through a very powerful telescope at things that are very far away, you've all seen this, you don't even need a telescope. Stuff dances around, right? You get shimmering and shaking. The bigger the telescope, the better it is for that, but actually because these little cells of moving air are only about that big, and it's just sort of bubbles, you know, like boiling water, and it disturbs the path of the light as it goes. Anyway, here are a whole bunch of telescopes. There are so many wonderful telescopes in existence now. Here, this little guy right here is the Mount Wilson 100-inch telescope. This was built in 1917. Went in service, saw what's called first light, which is a telescope term, in 1922. And a guy named Edwin Hubble, for whom the Hubble Space Telescope is named, was working at the Mount Wilson Observatory and making observations. And Hubble is the first guy to figure out that this thing, which happens to be the Andromeda Galaxy, is actually made of stars. All these stars are in our own galaxy. We live in a galaxy that looks very much like this. Our galaxy and the Andromeda Galaxy. This one is 2.2 million light years away. It's 100,000 light years in diameter and 10,000 light years thick, very much like the Milky Way galaxy is. 100,000 by 10, right? This one is 2.2 million miles away. Hubble resolves this thing into individual stars, and he says, wow, this thing is way bigger than we ever thought. And there are, within range of his telescope, hundreds of more galaxies. And so it's like, man, there's so much stuff around here. We got to study it. So then, in 1948, and I actually remember this very well, because I was already a nerd by that time, the next great telescope is this one. This is the Hale 200-inch telescope. This is the first one. This is the second one. This was the biggest telescope in the world for a very long time, because it's made out of this is a reflecting telescope. It's made out of glass, and the glass is about this thick, and it has to be that thick because you're going to point it around this way and that way, and you don't want it to sag. The figure of the mirror has to be so accurate that within a few angstroms, and I don't know if we're going to have time to get to angstroms or not, but what will happen if it's not that thick is as you point the telescope, the mirror sags, and the thing goes out of focus, and the images are distorted. And people said, well, this is as big as we're ever going to have to. We will never make a telescope any bigger than this one. This is going to be the limit. But, you know, look where we are now. Look at this little camera here. I mean, that's the least of wonders. So, turns out you can make a telescope with a much thinner mirror, provided you put some little actuators on the back, which can be controlled by hydraulic pressure, where the amount of sag of the mirror can be measured, and the mirror bent back into shape. Also, you can overcome, the other thing was this, that because of this turbulence in the atmosphere, there's an absolute limit to what you can resolve from an earthbound telescope. You got to put the telescopes in space. And that was sort of standard understanding for a long time. It turns out that that's not even true. You can, within the optical path of the telescope, you can put a thing called, they all have lots of other mirrors which are directing the image from here to there through the equipment. There's a thing called dynamic focusing, where the little secondary mirror can be adjusted by tiny, very precise actuators, which respond to, while you're making your observation, you turn on your laser, and as the laser light gets refracted from the atmosphere, you see what corrections you have to make on your mirror to keep the image fixed in space. I'm getting a little off my direction here. Help me to I mean, you know, I see some blank stares, and just let me let me know whether I'm still making sense or not, because there's no way I can tell. Okay, so they get bigger and bigger. No, not yet. Thanks. Because here's the Hubble Space Telescope. Where the hell is it? Here it is. This is the Hubble Space Telescope. It's about the same size as the original 100-inch Mount Wilson telescope, but is in space, and took, among other things, this photograph. And this is where I sort of fell off the edge of the universe last time, because I showed this right before my head blew up. This is a picture taken of, if you take a piece of paper, you stick a pin in it, right? You hold it out at arm's length, all the way out here. What you see through that little pinhole in the paper is this. It's a 100-hour time exposure. And I have to say something else about these telescopes. There are not people out there sitting at the eyepiece cranking, you know, what you might. This is all automated. Absolutely. All the telescopes are hooked together. Something happens. What happened? Is that better? All of the telescopes are networked together. And something happens. Somebody makes an observation of a gravity wave, arrives at one of the gravity wave detectors. At the moment, there are only 2 that are in operation. So the best you can say is, well, this event occurred somewhere out there. But what happens is, word goes out to all the observatories in the world who are part of this network. Stop whatever you're doing. Go point your telescope at this area and see if you can see anything that might coincide with this wonderful event which just occurred, which is a whole topic for another talk. And so they do. And then, all right, when that either does or does not, you have to then be able to get your telescope back to the exact same little spot where it was, so that the images of the stars you were looking at before are falling on the same pixels of your detector. Nobody takes photographs anymore. Of course, it's all digital stuff. It's all acquired by automatic things. Okay, all right, so anyway, here we are. There are 10,000 galaxies here in this little tiny hole that we're looking through, to not even the edge of space yet. That is 1/13 millionth of the entire celestial sphere. So if you do the math, you find out that there are 2 trillion galaxies within 13.6 billion light years of where we are. Okay, wait a minute. I still don't have time for I'm not going to get to part 2 at all. Okay, so Edwin Hubble finds that there are stars in the galaxies, and that not only are these galaxies very, very far away, they are all rushing away from us. They're all speeding away. And not only that, within the last 15 years, we're learning that the speed, the expansion is speeding up, going faster. When I used to read about this stuff a lot. During the 60s, the question was, well, okay, is the universe expanding, and then is gravity going to slow it down finally, and then it'll all collapse again into a huge crunch? You may remember this discussion. I don't know how much. I have to say this about this. I learned a lot of this stuff from my father, who was just a working stiff. He was an airframe mechanic, But I think people in the 1940s were much better informed about science, and I don't know why I say science. Huh? Well, is it? We've got
about 5 minutes. If you want to take any questions, we would need to do that right now.
Okay. But I don't know if I. All right.
I know it's a big topic.
Huh?
I know it's a very big topic.
Okay. I want to show one more picture where I would like to be heading. This is the other end of the universe. This is, hold it up. This is the other end of the universe. This is the early results of a project called the Human Connectome Project. You know what the Human Genome Project is, right? We all know that. We've unscrambled the entire genetic code. This is an attempt to unscramble the way that your neurons, of which there are 18 billion in your head, are connected together. Here's a neuron. Two of these neurons together connect up at all these endpoints, right? And that is where this miracle of consciousness and awareness, which we wake up with every morning. I mean, look around you. You're aware. You're a conscious being living here on this planet, this little billiard ball, among 4 trillion other galaxies, all of which contain billions of planets. You think we're alone? So let me just make my final point here, and then I'm Deb. You going to haul me away? Get the hook. Okay, 2 things. That's the miracle. You don't need to look for magic. You don't need to look for God even. It's here. It's in the stuff. The second point I want to make is this. I just want to say this because it looks like almost everybody here knows this, but last Wednesday morning, my wife Winnie died very suddenly and peacefully at home, unexpectedly. And so I'm in a sort of a different kind of place than I used to be, and certainly than most of you are right now. And I just want to say this to you. If you have people in your life who are close to you and who you love, tell them about it. Not that we didn't tell each other about it, but because, it can end in a heartbeat. It will end in a heartbeat, and you will be, no matter how recently you said it, and do some of the things that she's bugging you to do. Fix the doorbell. It won't kill you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No.
Questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Questions. We have
Okay.
questions, he says. How'd I do that? You don't think we do, but
That's okay.
thank you. Oh, this is wonderful.
Now, we're looking at about 11:27. I know many of you need to be out promptly at 11:30, but if anyone has questions, we still got a few minutes to take some questions,
Thank
if you wouldn't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay. How this works is we will bring a microphone to you. Here's one, Lou. Hold it very close to your mouth.
Hi, Ken. First of all, please accept Jim and I's condolences.
Oh, wait a minute. I got to turn my... No, where's my hearing aid?
All right.
Can you tell me what the question is? I lost my hearing. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Serena.
So Jim and I are so sorry for your loss.
Oh, thank you, yes.
And I'm sure she's here watching you. I just have a comment and a question.
Good.
Thank you for being such a passionate and informed and engaging speaker. We're so glad we came. And the question is, so when are you going to do part 2?
After next June, I think, or maybe July.
Great. Okay, here's a question here. Yeah, right here.
Yes, at the very beginning, you made some comment that the planets that we watch going around some seem to go one way and then reverse
Yes.
and go the other way.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain that, please?
Sure. That's called retrograde motion. Think of this. You're on the highway, you're driving down to the beach past that big lake bed, you know, or anywhere, and you're going to pass a vehicle. So you pull over to the right. We pass on the right in Mexico, right? And as you're looking at the truck that you're going to pass, the truck is moving the same direction you're going against the scenery. Okay? So you're moving, the truck, if you look at it compared to the background mountains, is also moving in that direction against the scenery. But as you get closer and closer to the truck, it seems to slow down, and then you pass it, and then once you're by, it's going the other way for a little while. And then you keep going, and then it turns around. So on all the planets that are beyond the Earth, this happens. We're here on the Earth going this way. Mars is here going the same way, only we're going faster because we're inside the orbit of Mars. So Mars goes around about every 2.5 years, and we go around once a year. And so we catch up to Mars, and as we do, we see it slow down, turn around, and then go back again. And that's of great significance to astrologers, right?
Yeah, indeed. Okay, any other questions? We are about out of time.
All right.
Here's one last question here.
One last question.
Thank you.
Hi, Ken. Your talk touched on many different areas that I think could each be
Yeah,
a
I know.
speech themselves.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be to pick one or two and then
I think that's good advice next time.
thoroughly discuss them, because I was thoroughly enthralled with what you had to say today. So I very much appreciate it, but then I got lost.
Me too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you very much,
All right.
Ken. Thank you
Thanks.
for your talk.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you. If everyone, be sure you check the floor around you for your coffee cups and so forth. Help us stack the chairs if you would a little bit. And we'll see you next week.